Today's interview, we turn the tables a little bit, and I'll get to ask Jason a few questions rather than the usual format here. The topic we came up for today's discussion is how to become a seller, I guess, of Scout memorabilia, and how do you decide when it's more than just a hobby? So, Jason, I guess the average collector sells, maybe sells a few things at a traderie or an art auction here and there on eBay, but they get to a stage where they realize they're becoming more of a seller, maybe, or selling is becoming a more major part of their hobby life, and it's more than just trying to raise a few bucks for the next big purchase. So how would you say the average seller should get started, or someone who's looking to get into selling more, as more a major part of their income stream?
Yeah, so we can, Bill, thank you for doing this. We can talk a little bit more about, some strategies of ways people can sell. But just to kind of open up, there's actually a few things people need to consider. We're recording this in the fall of 2021, and just this year, the Congress passed a law that said that beginning in 2022, they are now going to track your online purchases and sales, really, to the point that if you sell more than $600 on a platform, then that platform is required to report that money to the IRS, and they will issue you a 1099 form, which is just a way of letting you know that they've told the IRS that you got this sale. Now, this is a big change. A lot of people in our hobby who have been what I might sort of call hobby sellers, I guess, if you will. The previous rule was $20,000 and up to 600 transactions. And so literally, I've talked to some people in our hobby that would track that very carefully. And if they got to $19,500 and something worth of sales in one calendar year, they would stop. I know of one dealer who literally had 3 different eBay accounts. One was in his name, one was in his wife's name, one was in his daughter's name, some kind of a game like that. And he would sell on one until he got close to that limit, and then he would sell on the other one. And he was just trying to keep this all just low enough below the radar so that he didn't have to declare any of the money. Now, truth be told, and obviously you hear this disclaimer whenever people talk about taxes. So the disclaimer is you are always supposed to report income to the IRS when you sell. That's always been the rule. But in terms of there being a sort of a paper trail to lead them back to your transactions, that didn't exist before. So in the previous regime, if you will, you had to sell $20,000 and 600 transactions. So it couldn't, something much more than a hobby business. But I think part of what changed for Congress and the government is that so many people now are what you might call these gig workers. And those folks are basically getting payments through Venmo and Cash Apps and stuff all the time for these gig jobs they do. And so it sort of became a way where the government wanted to be able to sort of track that. So now that going in 2022, the rule is going to be $600 and just even one transaction of $600. Now, truth be told, and again, no tax advice here, are they going to track you down if you sold a patch for $600 and you don't report it on your income? Chances are very small. But it does kind of change the game a little bit where people have to maybe consider being a little more serious about it. The benefit of kind of setting yourself up as a business, which is probably more of a step that people want to take who are watching this video, is then you can legitimately, on your taxes, you can take expenses. And so obviously none of this is free. Driving to a traderie is not free. Buying patches from people that you want to resell is not free. And so those are things you could take off of your taxes and kind of, make that profit disappear, if you will. But I think that, selling memorabilia online has been something that I have done, just as you said, Bill, just to kind of fund buying more stuff that you want to keep. Obviously, all of us have extra stuff that we really don't want. It doesn't fit into our collection. And a lot of times we will take that to traderies and try to sell it. But there haven't been many traderies during COVID, and even though COVID is kind of on the downside, there's still some traderies that have been canceled this year in 2021. And so, tradery used to be a pretty reliable place to go to sell stuff. But then also in general, traderies are not as well as attended as they used to be. An analogy is kind of like I was listening to a podcast earlier today about my favorite college football team, and there's been some griping about the stands not being completely full. And one of the problem is that everyone can just watch these things on TV, and so why go through all the trouble of actually going to a Saturday college football game when you can have maybe a better experience on your flat screen TV, sitting in your own couch. And so the same thing with selling memorabilia. Traderies are kind of scattered all across the country, far-flung places, and there used to be more of a following to travel to those. But now when people can wheel and deal on Facebook and some of these other platforms we're talking about in a minute, it's kind of declined. So yeah, there's several things to consider, and I'm sure we'll get into those more during this conversation today.
Yeah, so you mentioned the $600 limit on eBay, or for IRS reporting going into effect next year. Aside from that, is there any other threshold you would think about for someone who's thinking about getting a little more serious into moving from a hobby to at least maybe a part-time business?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is always, and I listen to lots of podcasts, and I listen and watch other YouTube videos from people that I sort of take advice from myself. And so really what you want to do if you're trying to make this a little bit of a part-time business is you definitely want to build it from the ground up and keep it as a part-time business. Don't give up your day job unless this is something you're going to do in your retirement years, which sounds like a fun activity. And I know some people in our hobby are definitely doing this as kind of a retirement gig, but I would say start slow. My own personal experience was I can kind of go back and track it. I started off in a bedroom for many years. My whole eBay business lived in a bedroom, and then it migrated to a shed that I refinished in our backyard, and then it migrated to a garage, and then it migrated to a basement. And then, it wasn't until way after a decade of doing this that it migrated to a warehouse space. So I think that folks, sort of start small and build it up. We can talk about some more tips for how you would get this started in terms of, what are some best practices and things like that. But I think that's kind of where I would say, if you have to build it, but build it, slowly, and try not to, sort of go for broke and spend a bunch of money on stuff that you don't need, trying to make it look like you're, running a warehouse or whatever, when really most of these things are so small. That's the good thing about selling scouting memorabilia is that patches weigh like an ounce, and you can fit a lot of it just in a closet until you really get much bigger.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a valid point. If you've got a few hundred patches you're looking to sell, it doesn't take up a large volume of space. You just need a good degree of organization to not mislay or mislist some of those patches.
Yeah, and the big thing that will get people, and this is true of just about everybody who starts on eBay, when you're selling like 50 items and that's your entire store, if you will, that's your entire offering, then you can just have those in a box. And if you sell one, you thumb through that box and you can find, oh, there's that one with the red border, that's the flat from New York, whatever. But you might want to start from the very beginning, kind of designing a way to store these items to where you can find them. Because what happens is eventually that that 50 item becomes 500 items, and it becomes 1,000 items you have for sale. And then when you sell an item, what you don't want to do is spend 15 minutes trying to find it, because you don't have your stuff organized. It's not labeled, it's not tagged, and you're like, it's around here somewhere. And so as I've kind of been able to scale my business up, that's something that I did in the beginning. I used to try to alphabetize everything, but over time that becomes really hard to keep that going. So eventually I got to a system where I just gave everything sort of a SKU number, if you will. And then the SKU numbers are part of the listing, and I'm able to find things no matter where they are, and just saves a lot of time. So think about that as well. How are you going to store the items so that you can find them easily?
Okay, so I've got 1,000 flaps that I've decided it's time to part with, or a friend came to me and said, hey, I need a couple of grand, for some major bill, and can you help me out? I've got this big pile of memorabilia. So now you've got your starting stock, so to speak. What do I do next?
Yeah, so there are several platforms that you can sell on, and those include Facebook, which I think we've already mentioned, eBay, Shopify is a platform where you can build your own store. That's probably a little more sophisticated than most people are going to get into. So a very easy way, honestly, is to sell on Facebook. We have a large Scout Patch Collectors Facebook group. There's 17,000 members. There's a couple of other Facebook groups in the same hobby that are also pretty popular, although I assume that basically everybody's on multiple groups. I know I'm in several of them. But what you can do is, first off, it's almost impossible to sell something without a good picture. And so, especially in this hobby where, border colors and tag from the bottom of the E to the W, whatever, that's how you tell variations and such. It is going to be important that everything that you try to sell, whether it be on Facebook, eBay, whatever, that you take good pictures. And it's kind of funny. We have some very big dealers in our hobby who, in my opinion, really do a terrible job of photographing their items. It's like they have this giant picture and the patch is like at the very bottom and there's all this blank space. I don't know why they never heard of the idea of cropping an image, but it's fine. But anyway, so that is very easy to do. These little iPhones that a lot of us have, or even your Google phone, if you will, they have terrific cameras. So all you really need to do is more get focused on the setup of taking a picture so that you can capture the image. And, a couple of things there. I'm not sure if I have one. Oh, yeah, right here. A little show and tell here. So I got this guy. I wish I could share a link for it, but I don't actually. I tried to find where I bought this from. I can't find it. But essentially, this is a little photo stand where you can screw in the camera, and then it holds the camera pointing straight down. And so this takes really good pictures. I use this all the time. And then you can also get an adapter so that you could actually have your phone pointing straight down. So again, if you want to go real simple and not use like a digital camera, you can get one of these rigs set up. That helps a lot because, what people don't really appreciate is having a picture taken where it's like sideways slanted and, it's just a very awkward angle for the patch. If people can tell what it is, that's still going to help, but I think the presentation matters a lot. Honestly, the other solution I would say is use a scanner. Probably 99% of the stuff that I have listed for sale is just on a flatbed scanner, and those work really well. Again, I would go back and say, take some time to crop those images so that they look nice and clean. Hey there. But I will give you a warning that with scanners, sometimes they like to play with colors, especially I've had problems with reds that turn out looking like oranges, or sometimes oranges that look a little brown. And it's just a couple of colors that I can never really predict which patch it's going to hit on. So just be a little careful with that. I've had a few patches returned to me because it wasn't exactly the colors they thought. So that's a little bit of a trick. So the other thing is taking a picture of the back of the patch. Very few sellers do that, but that is a good way because a lot of times I will get questions from potential buyers that are asking me if they could see a picture of the back because, as you know, sometimes there's these random things about the back, gauze back, plastic back, whatever, and that helps tell them which issue it is. Those are questions that I hate to get because I hate to spend 10 minutes running to the back, finding a patch, photographing it, and then I send them the picture and then I never hear from them again. But, it is a little bit of customer service.
Yeah, so I guess the tip there is if there's an A, B, and C variety, take a picture of the back. If that's one of the clues to determine the differences.
Yeah, right. And and it doesn't cost you anything more to list. In fact, on eBay you can list up to 12 pictures, so it's totally acceptable. And actually, they suggest 3 pictures on eBay, even though typically that's more generic, not specific to our category. But I would say the better you can help people identify what you have, the more likely they would be to buy it, because you don't want to have any friction where they're unsure of, like you're saying, which variety it is, or the condition of the patch, for example. Then you're going to leave some sales on the table still.
Yeah, and I guess also taking a picture of the back helps validate that there's no glue stains or tape marks or anything else on the back, where if you're listing several dozen patches in a sitting, it might be easy to overlook. And like you say, creates friction with the potential buyer.
Yeah, it is tricky, as you just said, Bill. You know, if you got like in your example of 1,000 flaps, right? Um, I can tell you it takes a long time to list 1,000 flaps, and it can be very monotonous. And so it's easy if you like creating one listing and you go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one, you're kind of just copying all that information over and over. So if you did have a patch that was sown and you indicated sown, and then you copy that information to the next one and the next one, well, the next two are mint condition, but you forgot to change that one little drop down window. So it is kind of a tedious thing to do, but you know, it just takes kind of a person who has a mentality of being very careful and kind of doing things in a rhythm. You can't get distracted, you know, talking on the phone, watching a TV show while you're doing this or something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe a little easier for the hobby seller, but time is money if you're looking to do it on a more serious basis.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to kind of scale this thing up where you can create some shortcuts, but you know, eBay and Facebook, those are good options. The trick with Facebook just becomes that, and I do this all the time. I post stuff in Facebook groups, and you know, I'm looking to resell. Problem with Facebook is everything becomes sort of a negotiation, and there's going to be probably for any sale that I make on Facebook, there's going to be 6 messages that go back and forth between me and the buyer. And the other complication is that there's a time delay because I can send the buyer a message and say, yes, it's available. Do you want it? And the buyer can say, yes, I'd like to have it. And then you say, okay, how would you like to pay? And then an hour later, they say, oh, how can I say, you know, and as this goes back and forth, and it's very time consuming to the point at which it almost, you sort of lose, you know, enthusiasm for it. It can kind of be a big time suck. And then so, but if you're just trying to sell a few things, I think Facebook's a great platform for that. I actually don't use, this might be a topic of conversation. I actually do not use the Facebook Marketplace options. So as people might be familiar, Facebook Marketplace is kind of like their answer to Craigslist and maybe in the future eBay. And there is a way to post something as an item that's for sale on Facebook, and it'll show up in some different places. You might, in your notification feed, you might actually see when people post things on your local marketplace if you're interested in. But for me, I just don't want to get into another sort of selling regime like that. And if you do sell things through Facebook using the Facebook Marketplace, then you're still kind of in the sort of trap of like, you know, 1099s and all that, because that's all going through as you know, you selling an item for sale. And so I sort of prefer to keep everything off of that system and just do it through private messaging back and forth. That just seems to work better for me. And that's how Facebook is kind of an alternative for me versus eBay, which is just more, you know, it's up there for sale. Click on this and enter your credit card, and you know, you got it.
Yeah, with Facebook, are you more an auction guy or a buy it now guy?
Yeah, so
Or
on
I guess
Facebook, you know,
does it
there's actually
depend?
not an auction, but there is kind of two different ways to do this where some people are like, make me an offer, and other people are, here's my price. And so, you know, I mentioned earlier, I don't really enjoy being bombarded by Facebook notifications. And so I always just list items for sale and I say, I'm asking for this. And again, to me, it's kind of trying to prevent there being friction between me, the seller, and potential buyer. So the phrase, you know, make me an offer, that creates friction where now you're putting impetus on the buyer to sort of scheme in their head, well, what is the right amount that's not too high, not too low, whatever. And then they're going to, you know, sort of pitch that to you. So I just sort of think that in my experience, putting a price on an item makes it absolutely frictionless. And I have really good success selling on Facebook in that way where people will just say, oh, you know, $20, and they'll just, and it's very painless. They just send me a message and say, I'll take it. And, you know, whatever kind of little, you know, adrenaline rush they get from doing that, I'm not sure how that works with, you know, buying and selling, but it does work. I oftentimes I'm amazed at the things that I can sell on Facebook that I feel like if I put them on eBay, they wouldn't have a chance, or they would sit there much longer. So I would be the guy who would put a price on it, but not everybody does that. Some people want to trade, and some people want to do this and that just gets a little more complicated than I want to get.
Yeah, I guess maybe if you have a better feel for what the true market value is, you can set your price. And if you're unsure, maybe the auction style is more appropriate. An eBay auction is more appropriate, or even one of the auction groups on Facebook.
Yeah, so and you're right, Bill. I'm not members of those auction groups. There are some groups where people do these auction deals, and again, me being wary of having too many messages and too many notifications, I just can't follow that. Kind of wears me out. But I absolutely endorse auctions. It's a little old-fashioned. eBay has kind of gotten away from that, and probably if you were to look at their website, maybe 90% of the items on their website are fixed price. But in our category, being that's a collectibles category, I think that there's not always an established price on an item. And so by running an auction, you really sort of roll the dice, but you can't lose as the seller. If you list it at what you want to sell it at and no one bids, then you've lost really nothing. If you list it at what you want to sell it at and it sells for 10 or 15 or 20% higher because two folks got into a bidding war on it, then that's great. And that's what the auction thing works. And so I have kind of gotten into a routine now where I auction when I get a collection in, I look at it, only the best pieces, maybe 10, 15% of the items am I going to auction. But those are items that I'm just not familiar with, and I think maybe are vintage and old, and maybe it's some camp that I'm not familiar with. And there's, I've had this happen where random camp patches, random council patches, even shoulder strips have sold for hundreds of dollars, and I had just no knowledge or idea that that was worth anything. But I've also had the other side happen to me, and I'm probably very guilty of this. Things that I, because I'm not passionate about them, I think, oh, that's a $5 patch, that's a $10 patch, and I list it on eBay and it sells instantly, and somebody on the other side is very happy to get that patch that they know is worth, $50 or whatever. But that's just kind of the game. It's all about how much, if you're getting into reselling as kind of a hobby, especially in collectibles, then the rule of thumb really comes down to how much are you paying for the items on the front end? And then, on the back end, once you've done all the work to research and list and scan and all that, then you can kind of try to get some of your money back and maybe even get a profit. I follow a couple people on YouTube, and one of them buys and resells postcards and other kind of ephemera, paper items, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy's sort of theory about how to run his business is he buys collections and large collections of this kind of stuff, to the point that for each individual piece or each individual postcard in the collection, he may only have a nickel or 10 cents or 25 cents in each item. But then if he can resell some of them for like $25 or $30, because they're special to somebody from whatever reason, then, he basically, his theory is try not to have anything in the inventory, in aggregate, and then you're guaranteed to make money. And so this happens to all of us. I know sometimes you have probably offered collections where you're getting a good price for the whole collection. You can sell 3 or 4 or 5% of the collection, the key pieces, and kind of make your money back, and then all the rest of it you just have. That's another conversation about what do you do with all those death piles of rank patches and all that other stuff that you accumulate. But anyways, that's another theory there.
Yeah, so you obviously, I wouldn't think anyhow that you don't want to buy a flap for $3 or $4 to sell at $5, because fees aside, and then that's a separate topic also. That's not a very large profit margin there. What would you say people should? And everyone's going to be different, but in general, what should people look for, or if they're looking to do this in a more business-like manner?
You're exactly right. The deal that I generally try to stay away from is buying collections from other collectors, because other collectors are going to like another way of saying this is I don't like to buy spreadsheet collections and collections where they've accounted for every single, like there's a mile swim patch. I have 3 mile swim patches, got it all charted out. Because a lot of the stuff that you'll buy in a collection, it really is like it's not going to resell, or else in my case, I already have 100 mile swim patches. What good is buying the 100th and 1st mile swim patch? I'm never going to sell the 100 I had, and I'm not going to sell the 101st one. So yeah, I think that's true. I think that depending on where you are in this whole stage, some of us are going to our lodge auction, and maybe we're buying some things that we want to resell, whatever. I think if you could buy a patch and then try to double your money, which is not really doubling your money in profit, but if you buy it for 5 and sell it for 10, there's still this work in between and the opportunity cost of you having gone to that auction or going to that event to get the patch. But that is sort of a goal I would shoot for, is to try to sell it for twice as much as you paid for it. And same thing is kind of true for collections. So if you paid $200 for a collection, try to have the goal of reselling it for 400. And if you can consistently do that, then you should be able to make a profit with your business.
Okay, so I mean, we touched on fees briefly, and eBay is I guess the giant platform that anyone doing this in a more business-like manner would probably be a significant player there, or that would be one of their main venues. How do eBay fees and other fees stack up? When you're determining your cost or your expenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, this is going to sound really weird, but the pandemic was actually very good to collectible sellers. And I'll give you the answer there. Because what happened was, when everybody was at home starting in March of 2020, everybody started playing with their collections. And no one probably could have seen this happen, but essentially what happened was a lot of collectible markets really took off and got very hot because people were sitting at home and they had time. So they started playing with their hobbies, whether it be comic books, trading cards, whatever. So eBay, kind of doing a favor to sellers, actually said, well, hey, in these collectible categories, we're going to give you extra listings. I guess they saw this, they're charting everything. So during the summer months of 2020, they said, hey, we're going to give you 50,000 extra listings to sell in these categories. And they kind of marketed it as like COVID relief, like we're trying to help our sellers. And when I was in the height of that, I kind of remember thinking that, well, that's silly, because there's nobody in our hobby that has 50,000 items in a store. That would take you years to build that up. Like, that's not helping us any. But what happened is that eBay realized that they had this collectibles market that was really taking off. So coming out of COVID, or I shouldn't say out, we're still not out, but in the fall, what they did was they really changed the game. They basically have taken away the idea of an insertion fee. So those of you who have ever dabbled on eBay back in the day, you'll remember that to post something for sale might have cost you 25 cents. So to post 100 items for sale might have cost you $25, whether you sold them or not. And so a lot of us back in the day would play these games where we would try not to list too much on eBay, because we were trying to keep up against these artificial tiers that they had set. I knew of people who actually would list 2,000 items, and they would list them for a month, and they would take them all down, and they would relist these other 2,000 items that they had, and then they would take them all down and kind of do this because they didn't want to sell more than what they could get free listings and such. So all that's out the water now. That's gone. What I would really recommend if people want to kind of build this business up is you could get a basic store for about $30 a month. And in that basic store, you have 10,000 free listings. I mean, it's pretty insane. It actually is it works out to be about 1/10 of what it cost pre-pandemic to sell in our category. And another reason eBay did this is because they used to farm out their card processing to PayPal, and now they've brought all of that in-house. It's a program called Managed Payments. I've been on it for a while. It works fine. It's no problem. And so they are now making money on both ends. They make money from a final value fee on the sale, but baked into that, they also have the card processing fees. And so to specifically answer your question, how much does it cost to sell on eBay? In our category, they're going to charge you 12.35% of the sale. And that sale includes the sale price, whatever you're charging for shipping, and the sales tax. I think that's kind of lousy, actually, but okay. And they're going to charge you that percentage plus 30 cents. So it's very similar to their old system, plus the card processing fees that PayPal would charge. So basically, you look at it, let's just say it's 15, probably what you could say is 15 to 20% of the sales price is going to be taken up by fees and all that sort of stuff, supplies and whatever. So when you're looking at your business, that's kind of your overhead right there. If you're doing this in your bedroom, about 20% of every sale is going to go out in fees and, other, time and whatever. And so that's how you can kind of structure it. But I think a lot of people, and there probably already are, honestly, there's over 400,000 items listed in our category. So there's a lot of people who are just dabbling on there, which is totally fine. That's great. A lot of interesting stuff comes onto the marketplace. I think that if people want to scale up their business, though, there's a great opportunity on eBay right now to really scale up your business. As we're filming this, not to brag to you, Bill, or anything, but this week I actually crossed a landmark that I'm really, really excited about. I now have over 50,000 items in my eBay store, all Boy Scouts. And I think at this time, I probably have the most items for sale in our category on eBay. I'm sure some other people off eBay have some more bigger stores. But that's just worked out really well for me. And my goal is just to keep adding to it, because even at this price point that I'm paying now, eBay gives me 60,000 free listings per month for the store that I have. And so I'm just going to keep building it. There's no cost, it doesn't cost you. So to me, it's a great time to be selling on eBay.
Yeah, and that's a tremendous accomplishment, just physically getting that number of items listed. And I know you've done it over years of effort. Is an incredible amount of work. Having done some stuff on eBay in years past, I know how listing a couple of dozen items can take, even with templates and trying to streamline your process. But that's a tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah, and I here I sit at this perch, and I definitely have always tried to be a little humble about it. I want to help people kind of build up to that. So, like I said, having claimed this in 2021, well, I started doing this in 2004, right? So this is over 15 years of kind of building it to this point, and then also bringing on employees, because if you're going to have all that stuff, you got to have some help too as well. So, but again, I think the whole idea here of this broadcast would be that everyone can kind of start small and grow their business. And for many years, my focus was not so much making money. And maybe in some ways, my wife would still say it's not, because I'm always buying stuff for my collection. But to me, it's a way to kind of recycle things back into the hobby. And then, of course, I'm able then to go and buy things that I'm interested in. So in this case, you might have seen this week, Joe Taylor from Texas put out a list of, he's selling his OA collection, and he has some terrific stuff. I think his collection on the spreadsheet is altogether like upwards of $400,000, list price. So, sure enough, I was able to go in and buy a couple of things that I needed for my OA collection. And so in my mind, I'm paying for those key pieces by selling a bunch of $5 and $10 patches over here. At least in my mind, that's how this math works.